Every single night, in a town that doesn't exist on any map, a man in a cowboy hat steps out of the tree line, tips that hat like he's greeting an old friend, and watches people die. He doesn't run, he doesn't scream, he just watches. Almost like he's done this before. Almost like he used to be one of the people watching from the other side. What if I told you that the cowboy, the calm, calculated, unofficial leader of the nightmare creatures in From, used to sleep in a bunk on a crashed bus? What if I told you he used to argue with Boyd Stevens about whether any of this was even real? What if the coldest, most controlled monster in the entire show started out as the most stubborn skeptic in the entire cast? I'm talking, of course, about Randall Kirkland. And today we are going all the way down the rabbit hole on one of the most debated, most divisive, and honestly most terrifying theories to ever come out of the From fandom. That Randall isn't just going to die in this town, he's going to become it. Specifically, he's going to become the cowboy. Stick around, because by the end of this video, I want you arguing with me in the comments, because this one is close. Let's get into it. Who is Randall, and why does this theory even exist? Let's rewind for anyone who needs the refresher, because context matters enormously here. Randall gets introduced in season 2, arriving on that ill-fated bus with a group of strangers who get funneled straight into the town's gravitational nightmare. From the jump, Randall is written as the resident denier, while everyone else is slowly, painfully accepting that the laws of reality have stopped applying. Randall is the one insisting there has to be a rational explanation, a simulation, an experiment, anything other than the truth staring him in the face. That skepticism isn't just a personality quirk, and I don't think the writers put it there by accident. It's thematic. From is a show obsessed with the idea that belief and denial are dangerous in different ways. Belief can get you killed by inviting the wrong thing across your threshold, but denial can get you killed too because you refuse to follow the rules that are actually keeping you alive. Randall spends an entire season being the loudest denier in the room, and denial on this show always seems to have a price. Then comes the possession. Randall, Julie, and Marielle all get taken by the music box monster, and all three of them, remarkably, survive thanks to Boyd's intervention. That's not nothing. Survival in this show is never just survival, it's a mark. It changes you. We've seen it change Julie in ways the show is still unpacking. So the fandom's very reasonable question became, what did it change in Randall? And that question is really the seed of this entire theory. Because once you start asking what a possession like that actually does to a person long term, you start looking at Randall differently in every subsequent episode. You start watching how he stands, how he talks, how the monsters treat him. And that's exactly what a very sharp corner of this fandom did. The evidence, part 1, the cowboy stance. Let's start with the piece of evidence that kicked off this entire theory in the first place. Because if you've spent any time on from Reddit or from TikTok, you have seen this clip 100 times. Fans started freeze framing moments where Randall is simply standing still, waiting, watching a scene unfold from a distance. And they noticed something: the posture, the weight distribution, the stillness of the shoulders, the slight forward tilt of the head, almost like he's listening for something the rest of us can't hear. It is, according to a huge number of viewers, functionally identical to the cowboy's signature stance. That loose-limbed, unbothered, almost amused way the cowboy plants himself at the edge of a scene, hands near his hips, hat tilted just enough to throw a shadow over his eyes, radiating this horrible patience. The theory calls this the cowboy stance, and once you see the side-by-side comparisons, it is genuinely hard to unsee. This isn't two random actors happening to stand the same way. This is a specific, repeated, directorial choice. And here's why that matters so much on a show like From. This is a series built by people who clearly love foreshadowing through physical staging. Camera placement, blocking, mirrored compositions between characters. These aren't accidents on this show, they're a language. So when editors and directors choose again and again to frame Randall in a posture that echoes one of the show's most recognizable monsters, the fandom's instinct isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. It's literally what this show has trained its audience to do for 4 seasons. Think about the psychological read on this too, because it's genuinely unsettling once you sit with it. A stance is one of the most involuntary things about a person. You don't consciously choose how you stand when you're half listening, half waiting, half a step outside of the moment you're technically standing in. If Randall's body has started without his permission, without his awareness, mirroring the physicality of the thing that once had him in its grip, that's not just a visual Easter egg. That's the show quietly telling us that whatever the music box monster did to him didn't fully let go, that something is still in there, patiently waiting its turn. Part 2, the Season 2 Nightmare Connection. Now let's talk about the second major pillar of this theory, and this one goes even deeper into the show's mythology, because it's tied directly to the concept of dreams and nightmares as a delivery system for truth on this show. From has established, over and over, that dreams are not just flavor text. Characters' nightmares bleed into reality. Visions predict events before they happen. The town uses dreams as a hunting ground. Nothing in a from character's sleep is ever just a dream. And the show punishes you narratively if you treat it that way. During Randall's most vulnerable stretch in season 2, in the immediate aftermath of the possession, fans point to imagery in his nightmare sequences that lines up disturbingly well with cowboy iconography. Wide brimmed silhouettes, Western motifs bleeding into the frame, a looming figure that watches rather than attacks. On a show that has repeatedly used nightmares as prophecy, that is not a small detail to wave away. If Tabitha's visions matter, if Victor's photograph matters, if Julie's episodes in the ruins matter, then Randall's fever dream imagery appearing at the exact moment his body was housing something ancient and hungry should matter too. Here's the theory taken to its logical extreme, and I want you to really sit with this one, because it's the part that keeps people up at night in the group chats. What if that nightmare wasn't a hallucination brought on by trauma? What if it was a memory? Not a memory of something that already happened to Randall, a memory being planted, a preview. The way you might show someone their new job before their first shift. What if the music box monster, in the process of possessing him, didn't just borrow his body for an afternoon? What if it left something behind? A seed, and that seed has been quietly growing in Randall for 2 seasons, waiting for the town to decide it's ripe. That reframes literally everything about his character going forward. Every panic attack becomes a symptom. Every moment of unexplained aggression becomes a crack in the seal. The show has spent so much time establishing that this town operates on cycles, that the same roles repeat generation after generation, that the idea of a next cowboy isn't some wild leap. It's basically the show's central mechanic. Somebody has to become the next monster. The only question is who, and the nightmare imagery is, according to this theory, the town's way of showing its hand early for anyone paying close enough attention. Part 3. Why won't this town let Randall die? Now, this third piece of evidence might be the most compelling of all because it's not about symbolism or camera angles. It's about hard narrative pattern. Randall should, by any reasonable measure, have died multiple times over. He has been in direct prolonged contact with the nightmare creatures on more than one occasion, under circumstances where literally any other side character on this show would have been torn apart within seconds. And yet, over and over, he survives, grievously injured, captured, left in situations that read, on paper, as death sentences. And every single time, the show finds a reason to pull him back from the edge. Compare that to how brutally, how casually, this show is willing to kill off characters we love. Nobody is safe on From. That's practically the marketing tagline at this point, which is exactly why Randall's survival rate stands out so much. When a show proves again and again that it has no problem ending major characters, and then it repeatedly, almost conspicuously, spares one specific person from a fate that should have been guaranteed, the audience is right to ask why. Plot armor on this show isn't accidental, it's a clue. And the fan theory takes this even further by pointing to the creature's own behavior. There are moments where the nightmare creatures have Randall dead to rights, completely at their mercy, and instead of finishing the job, they hesitate, they circle. They almost seem to be observing him rather than hunting him. The same way you'd watch something that belongs to you rather than something you're trying to destroy. If the town's creatures are, on some level, extensions of a single guiding intelligence, then that intelligence appears to be making a very deliberate choice to keep this particular human alive. Not because he's useful, not because he's clever, but because he's being saved, being prepared, being kept intact for whatever role is waiting for him. This is where the theory gets genuinely chilling from a storytelling perspective, because it recontextualizes Randall's entire arc as a slow motion recruitment. Every trauma he survives isn't just a brutal thing that happened to a side character for shock value. It's another step in a transformation the character himself doesn't even know is happening. He thinks he's surviving. The show, according to this theory, is quietly showing us that he's being groomed. What would it actually mean? I want to pause the pure evidence gathering for a second, because I think the reason this theory has grabbed people so hard isn't really about the visual clues. It's about what it would mean thematically. From has always been a show about trauma with a capital T, about how a place, a system, a cycle of violence can hollow a person out and repurpose them without their consent. We've already watched this happen in slower, subtler ways with other characters. The town doesn't just kill people, it changes them. It uses them. If Randall becomes the cowboy, that's not just a twist. That's the show's thesis statement made literal. The skeptic, the man who spent an entire season insisting that none of this was real, that there had to be a logical explanation, becomes proof of the exact opposite. His denial doesn't protect him. It's arguably what makes him vulnerable. Because denial means you never build the defenses that belief, however uncomfortable, might have given you. There's something almost tragic and almost poetic about that. The character most determined to convince everyone this town couldn't touch him becomes the physical embodiment of what the town does to people. And think about the horror of that from Randall's own perspective, assuming any part of him remains aware. Imagine surviving possession, surviving capture, surviving injury after injury, genuinely believing you are clawing your way towards some kind of escape or resolution, only to eventually understand that every single one of those survivals was never a victory. It was a rehearsal. The town wasn't failing to kill you, it was training you. That's not just scary in a jump scare sense. That's existentially horrifying. That's body horror for the soul. There's also a really interesting layer here about identity and free will, which is arguably the beating heart of everything From is trying to say. If the cowboy really is what's left of a person, buried under decades or centuries of the town's influence, then Randall's transformation wouldn't be an external monster taking him over from the outside. It would be closer to erosion, a slow replacement of the self, one trauma at a time, until the person who used to argue about simulations and logical explanations is completely gone, and all that's left is the stance, the stillness, the patience, the hat. Why a huge part of the front isn't buying it now. I promised you the other side of this debate, and I mean that because if I only gave you the evidence for this theory, I'd be doing you a disservice. And honestly, the pushback here is just as fascinating as the theory itself. The first and most common counterargument you'll see in any comment section is refreshingly simple. It's just a belt. Fans who are skeptical of the cowboy stance argument point out that a lot of what's being read as a deliberate visual callback might just be ordinary blocking. Actors are given marks to hit. Directors position people a certain way to keep a frame balanced, to keep sightlines clean, to make sure the shot reads well on camera. A guy standing with his weight on one hip near a doorway isn't automatically a coded prophecy. Sometimes a stance is just a stance, and if you go looking hard enough for parallels between any two characters on a show this visually deliberate, you're going to start finding them whether they're actually there or not. There's also a very grounded, very practical argument about actor availability and production logistics. Skeptics point out that the cowboy has, at various points, clearly been played by different performers under the mask and makeup depending on scheduling, and that assuming every physical quirk we see from that creature is meant to permanently and specifically track back to one actor's real world habits is shakier ground than the theory wants it to be. Sometimes the person under the hat that week just happens to stand a certain way and it has nothing to do with narrative intent at all. And then there's the argument that carries the most weight for a lot of viewers: the cast and crew pushback. In interviews, actors involved with the show have addressed fan theories directly, including ones swirling specifically around Randall, and have gently steered audiences away from some of the wilder threads of speculation. When the people actually on set actually reading the scripts months or years ahead of us, respond to a theory with amusement rather than confirmation. A lot of viewers take that as close to a debunking as you're going to get without an outright spoiler. It doesn't necessarily kill the theory completely, because actors dodge and deflect for a living. That's basically in the job description. But it does lower the temperature considerably for anyone who was ready to treat this as a done deal. Skeptics will also point out a structural issue with the theory itself. The cowboy has been an established, active, fully formed presence in this town for what appears to be a very, very long time, long before Randall ever stepped off that bus. For the transformation theory to work, you have to explain how the timeline lines up, whether we're talking about replacement, possession, merging, or something else entirely, and the show hasn't given us nearly enough information about how any previous human might have become any previous monster to say with confidence that Randall's specific arc is heading in that exact direction. Right now, a lot of this rests on visual pattern matching and narrative instinct, rather than anything the show has confirmed on screen, and for a fandom that has been burned before by theories that felt airtight right up until the writers zigged instead of zagged, that caution is completely fair. Where I land on all this. So, where does that leave us? Honestly, I think both sides of this argument are doing exactly what a show like From wants its audience to do. The theorists are engaging with the show's own visual language, its obsession with cycles, its history of turning victims into vessels, and they're building a genuinely compelling case out of details the show absolutely put there on purpose. The skeptics are doing the equally important job of keeping the fandom honest, reminding everyone that not every camera angle is a prophecy and not every stance is a smoking gun. What I will say is this. Even if Randall never literally becomes the cowboy, even if the writers never confirm a single frame of this theory, the fact that it's even plausible tells you everything about what kind of story From is telling. This is a show where survival is never guaranteed to mean safety, where the line between victim and monster is treated as something that can blur, shift, and eventually disappear entirely. Whether or not Randall ends up under that hat, the town has already proven it's capable of doing exactly that to someone. And as long as that possibility exists, the fandom is going to keep watching every stance, every stare, every silence a little more closely than the writers probably ever expected. So that's the case for and against Randall as the next cowboy. Personally, I think there's just enough smoke here to justify the fire, but I want to know where you land. Are you fully on board with this theory? Are you firmly in the it's just a belt camp? Or do you have a completely different read on where Randall's arc is actually headed? Drop your take in the comments, because some of the best theories on this channel have started exactly there. If this kind of deep dive is your thing, make sure you're subscribed, because we've got a lot more From theory content coming, and I genuinely don't want you to miss it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.